Imagine this here. What if you lived a life completely free from the modern grind? No alarm clocks violently waking you up at 6 a.m., no gridlock traffic, no endless email notifications to answer, and no corporate boss staring over your shoulder demanding updates. Today's average human spends 40, 50, or even 60 hours a week selling their labor just to survive. We trade the vast majority of our youth and energy for pieces of paper, just to hand them over for rent and food. We assume it has always been this way, that human life is inherently a struggle against the clock. But history hides a massive secret. Anthropological data reveals that early hunter-gatherers didn't possess a concept of hustle culture. They didn't understand the grind. In fact, to secure enough food, shelter, and resources for the entire community, the average ancient human only worked about 3 to 5 hours a day. Once the morning berry gathering was finished and the simple tracking tools were set, their mandatory economic obligations for the day were completely over, which leaves a massive, staggering question that our modern minds struggle to compute. What did they do with the remaining 12 hours of daylight? They didn't sit in miserable existential boredom. Instead, they unlocked a version of human consciousness that our overstimulated brains can barely comprehend. To understand what they did with their freedom, we have to realize that survival wasn't a non-stop corporate marathon. It was a deeply focused, episodic sprint. When it was time to hunt, they gave 100% of their focus and physical strength to the tracking of game. But the moment the hunt was successful, productivity entirely paused. An ancient human would never hunt a second mammoth just to store it away for surplus value or market trade. Doing so would be viewed as madness. When their immediate physical needs for the week were met, our ancestors defaulted straight to absolute, unbothered leisure. They filled their massive abundance of leisure hours playing games. Prehistoric sites are completely packed with ancient dice made of bone and primitive flutes carved from eagle wings. They filled their massive abundance of dark, unlit hours by becoming the world's very first astronomers, mapping out intricate movements of the constellations. Deep inside quiet caves, they spent hours crushing natural pigments, mixing clay, and logging their personal and spiritual history directly into complex cave art. They also played elaborate games. Prehistoric archaeological sites are completely packed with ancient dice made of bone and primitive flutes carved from eagle wings. Adult play wasn't looked down upon as a waste of time. It was the primary mechanism used to maintain group peace and burn off survival stress. This wide-open daily schedule allowed for a depth of uninterrupted social bonding that we severely lack in our hyper-connected modern era. Without individual rooms or screens, the entire community lived in a completely shared psychological reality around the fire, passing down survival lore through vivid oral storytelling. Because they had the time to observe, they possessed a vast library of practical knowledge. A single individual could instantly identify hundreds of plant species and track animal footprints over bare rock. Their brains evolved to use empty space to run internal survival simulations, constantly scanning, planning, and assessing potential threats without distraction. Which brings us to the ultimate glitch of modern society. We are currently running 50,000-year-old primal hardware inside a highly digital world. Because our ancestors spent their days bonding and reflecting, their nervous systems were balanced. Today, we are digitally connected, yet report the highest levels of true isolation in human history. We have hyper-optimized our time until every single waking minute must be productive, profitable, or tracked by an app. We have effectively made ourselves prisoners. But our ancestors lived in a completely different reality, one where time was a continuous, repeating loop dictated by nature, not a linear race to a corporate finish line. They filled their massive abundance of dark, unlit hours by becoming the world's very first astronomers, mapping out intricate movements of the constellations. Deep inside quiet caves, they didn't just sleep. They spent hours crushing natural pigments, mixing clay, and logging their personal and spiritual history directly into complex cave art. They also played elaborate games. Prehistoric archaeological sites are completely packed with ancient dice made of bone and primitive flutes carved from eagle wings. Adult play wasn't looked down upon as a waste of time. It was the primary mechanism used to maintain group peace and burn off survival stress. For nearly 2 million years, this balanced, high-leisure lifestyle was the definitive human experience, until a single accidental discovery changed the trajectory of our species forever. Around 12,000 years ago, humans stumbled into the agricultural revolution. It wasn't a sudden choice, but a slow shift, likely forced by severe climate changes. But the moment we started planting seeds, we stopped moving. We settled down. And the instant we anchored ourselves to the land, our massive 12 hours of daily free time completely evaporated. Farming wasn't an episodic sprint like hunting. It was continuous, exhausting, back-breaking daily labor. Instead of living entirely in the present moment, humans were suddenly trapped by anxiety about the future. For the first time, our ancestors had to constantly worry about next month's rainfall, crop diseases, and winter storage. This constant labor birthed a brand new phenomenon, the food surplus. We finally had more grain stored up than we could consume in a single day. But surplus introduced a dangerous psychological problem. If you have a massive pile of valuable resources locked down in a fixed location, you have to protect it. This immediate need for defense birthed the very first walls, complex laws, and standing armies. With resources controlled in warehouses, the equal tribal model died. Society instantly fractured into strict hierarchies. The world was now run by kings, rulers, and a massive class of permanent laborers. To feed the rulers and the armies, the common human had to work double the hours. This was the exact structural blueprint for the modern world. Thousands of years later, the Industrial Revolution simply took this model and mechanized it. We were moving away from natural sunlight, forced into factories to pull repetitive levers to the beat of a machine. We invented punching the clock. Time stopped being a natural loop and became a rigid grid divided into billable minutes. Which brings us straight to the office cubicle and the smartphone screen of today. We trade 40 to 60 hours a week just to pay for shelter, and we convince ourselves that this hyper-optimized stress is peak human civilization. But if you look closely at the data, an ironic truth emerges. The ancient hunter-gatherers we look down on actually possessed the ultimate luxury we spend our entire modern lives saving up for. Think about it. What is the modern retirement dream? We grind for 40 years just so we can finally stop working, sit by a fire with friends, and do absolutely nothing. For early humans, that wasn't a reward at the end of old age. It was their everyday reality. We have traded time wealth for material wealth. We have infinite digital entertainment, fast food, and heated houses, but we don't have a single hour of quiet peace. Our old hardware is simply burning out under the digital noise. So how do we fix the glitch? It starts by aggressively defending your remaining hours. Turn off the notifications, close the screen, and let your mind experience true silence. Because when you finally unplug from the matrix, you aren't being lazy. You are simply returning to the exact lifestyle your brain was beautifully designed for.